Have you ever felt exhausted, overwhelmed, overscheduled, anxious, isolated, finding it difficult to cope, dissatisfied? Are you feeling some of those even now? Because my guess is that for most of us at some point in our life we felt those, and sometimes some of those things linger and are part of our lives. And when we feel some of those sorts of things, we're not functioning at our best. When we're feeling anxious and overworked and overscheduled, we're not thinking as clearly as we might. We're not making good choices. In fact, in many cases, what we're trying to do is to get rid of those things in our life, and we'll do almost anything to get rid of them, and not necessarily good and positive things for us and the people around us and our ability to follow God. When we're feeling in those sorts of ways, our buckets are empty or are heading in that direction. And it's a heading sort of thing, because as we're feeling overwhelmed and overworked and anxious and exhausted, we're not in a good position to think of things that would be healthy, that would contribute to our health, and so the bucket gets emptier and emptier. The problem actually is that we may be feeling that our buckets are overflowing and full, but not necessarily overflowing and full of good things. They're overfilled and full of, well, the things we're worried about, and commitments that maybe aren't building on our lives, and things that aren't being helpful to us and the people around us, but we're feeling stuck. But in reality, in terms of the bucket that gives us energy and vitality and the ability to see clearly in life, that bucket, that one's getting emptier and emptier. So, let's go back again to the story that Mark just read. Mary and Martha. Jesus was coming to town. Now, it appears from a variety of stories that these two women had a particularly close relationship with Jesus. It wasn't just that they heard Jesus was coming and quickly went out and invited him into the house, but that there had been some sort of ongoing relationship. And so for Jesus, this would have been a place of refuge, a place to go and be able to just sit and to be away from some of the pressures of the Pharisees and the scribes and the crowds and all the stuff that was regularly around him. So Martha invites him over, and he comes, and Mary's there with him, listening to him, listening to the stories, interacting with him. And Martha, she's busy. It said, in what Mark said, she's pulled away by all the concerns of getting ready for the deal that Jesus was here. The translation I use is she was distracted. She wasn't seeing the real thing, the important thing. We all get into a state like that at times. Problem is, some of us seem to be regularly in a state like that, where we can't see the important stuff. We just see the sort of list of things that would be good things to do. Nothing wrong with getting your house ready to have guests over. Nothing wrong with preparing a meal. The problem was somehow Martha was distracted and didn't see that the really important thing was hanging out with Jesus. There's lots and lots of stories that Jesus tells and encounters he has where he encourages people to serve others. So the question here isn't about service. But in this particular instance, Martha got things confused. She got pulled away from what was really important and started doing stuff that was maybe important, maybe culturally important, maybe important because that's what her mother taught her what she should be doing, but not important at that moment with Jesus there. She had lost focus. It wasn't about sometimes we do this in the church. We talk about Martha who serves and Mary who's very spiritual. That's not what this story's about. It's about Martha who got distracted from what was important. So when we get ourselves in this situation like Martha is, where we are distracted, how do we get back and gain a focus? Or even how do we not get distracted? How do we keep a focus in our life? How do we maintain our life in such a way that we can regularly sort out the important stuff from the good stuff? How can we, or the stuff that's not so good, how can we maintain a focus on the sorts of stuff that God would desire for us to be doing, that the stuff that gives us purpose, the stuff that contributes to the kingdom of God? Well, as Mark said, we're working with a book. We're being inspired by a book called Simplify by Bill Hybels. And I would recommend it. We're working with the first chapter here. We'll take a look at some other chapters later. I have found every time I have read it in preparation for this series, I've reread the first chapter a couple times. I have found that there are things I go through, and there's things that are just very practical that I've been finding that I can apply to my own life, which is why it made sense for us to continue and work with it here. So, if you have a chance to read it, I would encourage you to do so, and there'll be some chances coming up on some of the other topics where we'll have Sunday school classes and stuff. But Bill says that there are 5 things that he can do for his life that help him keep the bucket of... Did something just die there? Something died. Came back. That keeps the bucket of energy and vitality in his life full, that enables him to see God's presence in his life and see God's invitation to do things in his life. There are 5 things that he finds helpful in that process that are his 5 things. Relationship with God, relationship with family, work, recreation, and exercise. Those 5 things, when he's doing well in his life and he's doing these things well, his life maintains, I was going to say balance, but it's not necessarily a balance, but it maintains an energy that keeps him going. And it maintains an ability to treat people around him well. And an ability to be able to see God's invitation to engage in the world well. And when his life is not going all that well, he can look at these things and they're not going well either. That he's just not able to do all of those sorts of things. And something's not going well in his life. So, when he's overwhelmed in his life, something is missing. Maybe lots of somethings are missing. Some of you, 2 weeks ago, may have taken that sheet of paper I handed out, the one that said action plan number 1. And you may have taken it home and thought about it, or you may have thought about it and lost the paper. That's fine. The question that was asked there is, where is your bucket? Is it full? Is it 3/4 full? Half full? Is it getting down where it's looking, the bottom of the bucket's looking pretty clear and there's not much water in it? And if it's not full, what's happening in your life that it's not full? Because oftentimes there's something or some things that are happening that are contributing to the fact the bucket is leaking water. What is it? It's not being filled up or it's leaking, one or the other. And what can we do about it? So the invitation was to do some reflecting on that 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, I introduced the idea of Bill's 5 things. And We talked about the first two. The first one being our relationship with God. And one of the comments that he made that really struck me is that oftentimes when he's talking to someone who says, I just find it really difficult to spend time with God, he says, so where do you do it? What's the chair you sit in when you're trying to spend time with God? And oftentimes those same people who are having trouble finding time with God cannot identify a place. And Bill's feeling is that oftentimes if we can identify a spot, it becomes a bit of a ritual, a bit of a spot that we can go there and it will help us be thoughtful about God, to be able to connect with God. Second thing he talked about was his relationship with his family. And that's where we left it 2 weeks ago. This time we're going to take a look at the other three. And we're going to continue thinking a bit about what it is for us. I've said several times, these 5 are Bill's 5. They may not be our 5. And what would that be? But let's take a look at the remaining 3. First one is work. God intends for us to work. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean working and getting paid. It could. But God intends for us not to just sit around twiddling our fingers, but that we will be out, involved in the world, working in one way or another. God envisions that work is going to give us purpose and meaning in our lives. It's not simply about income. It's about being involved in the world, contributing to the world, making it a better place. Work is part of what keeps us ticking. At least it is when work goes well. The problem is for many people that work doesn't go well. That work, rather than being something that fills up their bucket, is something that drains their bucket, is a continual drain on their energy and vitality and creativity and ability to function well in the world. Now, the reality is, for many of us, work has stresses. I can't think of anyone who doesn't have stress at some level around work. I mean, I keep hearing about, the different climate stuff and water and mud and stuff that Mark has to work in. I mean, all of us have that sort of thing at times. The problem comes when work is always a stress, and there's even for some people, work is a stress, but it also is something that gives them purpose and meaning in life, and the two work together. There's a tension there, and that's okay. But when the stress is always and consistently greater than the energizing factor, that's when it becomes an issue. And it is an issue like that for lots of people. I'd like to suggest that if work is like that for you, that there are some things that you can do about it. And it starts by talking to God about it and asking God for help. And I'm going to suggest 3 ways that you could potentially ask God for help around this. There may be lots more, but there's at least 3. The first one is to ask God for a shift in your own mind about what that work is doing. And to try and see the work in a more positive way, or see aspects in a more positive way, or to be able to get involved in different ways that will give you energy. There are lots of jobs that I look at and go, man, I couldn't do that. One of them is dentistry. I cannot imagine being a dentist. It's not with the drill sound or anything like that. It's staring into someone's mouth, mouths, multiple mouths all day long, all week long, year out. I can't imagine it. I go to a dentist who is energized. We've been going to him since before we had kids, and he's great, he's engaging, and he's thrilled to be a dentist. So given that, different people are giving different gifts and abilities and things that they can get excited about. He'll talk about going to conventions of dentists. I cannot imagine anything worse than a convention of dentists. But he's thrilled to go. He's happy to be a dentist. So one of the things I think that I observe from that is that, there are ways of getting being nurtured in almost any job, even as a dentist. And you can imagine other folks. So we can pray and ask God to help us see the great things in the job that we're currently in, even when we can't see them. Sometimes with help we are able to. The second is that maybe we need to ask God to help us find other forms of work, that take the gifts and the skills that we have and to find a position that we can better use them in serving God and serving the people around us. The third possibility, I know some people who've been able to do this, they're working in a job that is a job that's okay, but their bucket's not being replenished in the job. But the job's making good money and they can't leave it. But maybe they could reduce the number of hours they're working, get paid a bit less, and use those other hours for things that can help reach out into God's world in a different sort of way. There may be other options, but talking to God about a job that is draining is the first step. The second one is recreation. All of us need to be doing stuff that isn't work. Stuff that uses our creative impulses, and I'm using the word creative impulses in a very broad sense of the word here. I mean, there's some of us who can't draw a line without using a ruler. I mean, it just doesn't work. The creative impulses, in some respects, I mean, don't ask me to do a painting. It just isn't there. But that's not the only way that we can be creative. And I think some of us get sort of box that creativity into something that I can't do and leave it. If you take a look at the word recreation, it is recreate. It's about recreating the energy and vitality in our lives, the ability to see the world and to see the world that God has created. We can do that in all sorts of different ways. One of the ways that I'm aware that I do this recreation thing is I renovate. And sometimes it doesn't feel a whole bunch like recreation when we've taken on too much of a jump. Ivan can relate to some of the work we did a couple of years ago. But it is part of that for me. Recently, I've been redoing a set of basement stairs. I needed to put in risers, but the treads were pretty much shot, so I had to take those out. And there were a couple spots that were really obvious how to do it, and there's some things that weren't obvious, and I had to spend some time thinking about it. This is the creativity part. You may not think putting in stairs is a very creative enterprise, but you're staring at it, you're looking at it, drawing sketches, taking time, scratching your head, very important step of any renovation, the scratching head part, and just doing all of that sort of stuff to come up with a plan. And then you buy the wood, and I pull out the table saw and the router and the sander and a variety of other tools, and I make the steps and make them fit in. And last night, the steps all went in. There's still a bit of an issue about transitioning from the kitchen floor onto the steps. But all of that stuff is making use of being creative. And for me, that's part of the recreation. Now, I know lots of other people do other things. Some people hike the Bruce Trail. Some people are walking like crazy to walk the Camino. Some people are doing, all sorts of different stuff fits in that category of recreation. Some people have sports or hobbies. I do some photography. For me, that's a way of looking at the world and trying to figure out how to capture what I'm looking at in a way that's going to communicate what I'm seeing. Those are all parts of being creative, of recreation. And it's part of what we need. It's something that engages us and probably connects us with other people in some way or another. It recreates energy and vitality in our lives. So that's Bill's number 4. Number 5 is about exercise. And for some people, their exercise may be very similar to some of their recreation. If running is something that gives you energy, and it also clearly is part of exercise, maybe it's a great combination. I actually hate exercising. It's one of the things, I do it, but I really don't like exercising. Some people talk about exercising in the morning and it gives them a boost for the whole day. Yeah, if I exercise in the morning, it just makes me tired and sore for the whole day. But I have discovered if I exercise on a regular basis, I start feeling better. And so, therefore, I exercise. But it's important for us. Sometimes it's sort of like spending time with God, where again, some people will claim, they have this time with God in the morning and they just get a buzz for it that goes through the whole day. I don't ever experience that. But I do experience that when I am regularly connecting with God, my life goes better. But exercise is something that is important in keeping us healthy on the outside. But if you're not, I went to a spiritual advisor once and he said a number of things, but one of his comments was, you can't connect well with God if your body's falling apart. You need to be involved in exercise and eating well in order to be able to spend time focusing on God as well. So, as I said, these 5 things, time with God, time with family, work, recreation, and exercise, are Bill's 5 things. And when he does well in these 5 things, his life functions much better. Well, I want us to do some thinking, and Emerson's got some pages that will help us do some of that thinking. So as he's getting them around, I'm not asking you to do anything with them right now, but you can look at them, but to take them home. But I wrote down Bill's 5 things, and then underneath that, I put down 5 spots, because what I want you to do is to take a look at those 5 things and go, are they my 5 things? Chances are they're not. Chances are that there's something in there that may resonate with you, but that there may be some other things. And you may only have 4 things that energize you, that give you, that help fill that bucket. You may have 6 things. You probably shouldn't have 10 or 12 things. That's getting too complex. But you may not have 5. That's okay. So take a pen at some point and mark this up. If one of his 5 things isn't right, scratch it out for you, because this is your list. And add them in. And then I provided spots underneath that, 5 spots for you to write out your 4 or 5 or 6, so you'll have to squish it in a bit, items that you come up with, because after you've done that scratching out and writing in and maybe scratching that out and writing something, it's going to be really messy. So you got your spot to write them out. And then what I would like to invite you to do is to take a look at that list of 5, 4, 6 things and make some choices. If these are the things that give you energy in your life, that fill your bucket so that you can see God's invitation in your life, that you can respond to the things that are important, that when some crisis comes up in your life, you can respond with a reserve. If these are the things that fill your bucket so you can do those things, then we need to be doing things that enable the bucket to be filled. So I'm going to invite you to think about the list that you come up with, and then to choose something that you can change in your life that will make a difference starting tomorrow. Because most of us have some things that we can make a slight change in our life that will make a difference, freeing up a little bit of time to do something that will make a big difference in the way our life works, in the energy that we have, in the vitality and the creativity that we have in our lives. And then I'm going to invite you to keep thinking a bit more and say, okay, there's some things that's going to take me a little bit of time to get my act together for. So to identify one thing that you could do next weekend, starting next week, that will make a difference. And there's some other things that you say, this would be something that would be really great for me to do, but it's going to take me a little bit longer than tomorrow or even next weekend to get my act together on. So identify one more thing that maybe you could start doing by the middle of February. Sort of like New Year's resolutions, except it's not New Year's anymore. But the idea is that by being wise and thoughtful, that you can make some small changes that will make a substantial difference in the way that that bucket is being filled up, that will make a difference in the way that you can live your life. The idea here is not to overwhelm your life with changes. It's to pack in so many things. You go, oh, I got a list of 10 things I could be doing by Friday. And you might do them this week by Friday, and then you will fall down Saturday exhausted. And that's not the point. At that point, you've emptied your bucket. You haven't filled it. The point here is to make small adjustments that can make a big difference in the long haul. So just offering this as a tool that might be helpful for you to try and figure out ways to keep that bucket of energy and vitality full, so that as you are living your life, you can live it so that you are not distracted, you are not pulled away from the important stuff into the unimportant stuff, that you're able to see what's really important. And you're able to respond to God's call on your life, to be able to do the things that God is inviting you to do. And each one of us have been given unique gifts and skills. We've been put in relationship with a unique combination of people. There are things that you can do that nobody else in the whole world can do. And that's some of the stuff that God is calling you to do. Some of the stuff that God is inviting you to do. So I'm inviting us to take a look at our lives, to make some changes so that the various streams that replenish our lives can be allowed to flow more fully into our buckets and to fill our buckets, so that we can see more clearly God's invitation to us to respond to Him in the world. Let's pray together. Lord, just as Martha was distracted, we often live our lives with a level of distraction. Help us find ways of keeping our buckets full enough that we're able to see and hear your invitation to live our lives fully in this world and not be distracted. Help us find ways to fill our buckets full enough that when challenges are put in front of us, we're able to be aware of your invitation and the direction that you're pointing. Help us to fill those buckets so that we have a reserve and can be wise and thoughtful as we walk in life. Help us as we look to you and desire to see the ways that you are indicating. Lead us, Lord, in Jesus' name. Amen.